Get acquainted with people, places, and activities that are live, local, and for you. First thing in the morning, weekdays at 9:30 a.m. on our Civic Center TV YouTube page, or watch us live at Civic Center TV or on Facebook. The Splash Live, Greater West Bloomfield's live update show. Wake up, Greater West Bloomfield. Start your mornings with a splash. What's happening around you? Hear about state events, businesses, and from the people behind them on the Megacast, an hour-long TV, radio, and streaming show keeping you informed on the day-to-day news. Listen in on talks with volunteer groups, documentarians, and financial advisors, Monday to Friday with your host, Tyler Kieft. Catch the Megacast weekdays from 10 a.m. to 11 on Civic Center TV, 89.3 Lakes FM, and streaming on MyMyTV.com. You're watching and listening to your home for Greater West Bloomfield News, Civic Center TV and 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, West Bloomfield, Kego Harbor, Sylvan Lake, 89.3 Lakes FM. It's the Megacast, an hour-long TV and radio streaming show keeping you informed on the day-to-day news. Live from West Bloomfield, we're bringing you the news, updates, and information impacting communities around Michigan. Join our host, Tyler Kieft, as he talks with community members, business leaders, and professional experts about the stories that impact you. You're watching the Megacast on Civic Center TV.
When the temperatures are chilly, being together warms the soul. Keep the winter fun going. Help protect yourself and those around you by keeping your COVID-19 vaccines up to date. Can I ask you a question? Why do you want to get the COVID-19 vaccine?
I don't like getting sick. The virus will die. It will be easy to not catch it. Keep my family safe and keep playing soccer. Because I love being vaccinated.
What's your hope for everyone?
I hope everybody gets the vaccine to keep safe and strong. Be like happy, having fun everywhere. Everyone stay safe and hope you get the vaccine.
1 in 4 Michigan homes has high levels of radon, a naturally occurring radioactive gas known to cause lung cancer. It doesn't matter where you live or what type of home you have. You won't even know it's there unless you test. So don't wait. Testing is cheap and easy. And if there's a problem, it's simple to fix. Visit michigan.gov/radon to learn more.
We took action. Will you?
Megacast begins now. Welcome to the Megacast, our live daily TV, radio, and streaming show looking into all things Michigan. I'm Tyler Kieft. Today we'll be talking to a number of people about topics of interest and importance to Michiganders just like you. And we'll begin in a moment here, just a little bit of programming. Now, it probably looks exactly the same here, but what we've done in the last 24 hours, the reason we took yesterday's show off was because we were flipping the studio around. Horizontally, of course, vertically would be a problem for the structure of the building. But at this point now, I've now done this show from 3 of the 4 angles of this particular desk that we're in front of. You're now in the spot. For those watching on TV, if you're watching on TV or on our stream, you're now in the spot that I used to stand in. I'm on the opposite side. This is not the view I always had in front of me, behind the camera before, but now it's the view you're going to have on your screen each and every day, making our studio a little bit more user-friendly in here so we can have more great programming from Civic Center TV's live studio at Green Media Center in West Bloomfield. Let's begin with our headlines and making news today on this Groundhog Day where Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow in Pennsylvania, meaning 6 more weeks of winter. I saw my shadow coming in this morning, so at least 6 more weeks of the Megacast. But that's not making news today on our local news page. Our first story is coming from Kayla Rubel at the Detroit News. Oakland County Circuit Court Judge Mary Ellen Brennan says she will rule quite, quote, sooner rather than later, end closed quote, whether or not lawsuits against Oxford Community Schools from victims of the Oxford High School shooting may proceed further along in the legal process. One of the main determinations, does the school district qualify for governmental immunity in these wrongful death cases? Cases in which plaintiffs claim the schools were negligent in their prevention of this tragedy. The victims' attorneys say their lawsuits meet the standards in these cases, while school defendant attorneys say Oxford is protected from such suits by the state's government immunity laws. Thus, why a judge must rule on whether or not these proceedings for these lawsuits in particular may continue. Judge Brennan from the Circuit Court said, quote, the law favors a resolution on motions that invoke governmental immunity for good reason. Right out of the gate, it applies. Then everybody should be able to get on with things, and the government shouldn't be in litigation for months and months and months continuing on, and closed quote. Nearly a dozen lawsuits have been filed against Oxford schools since the shooting in November of 2021, claiming that the school district and high school officials were negligent in preventing the shooter from being in a position to harm his classmates as well as school staff, and therefore hold some responsibility for their injuries and the deaths that occurred on November 30th of 2021. These cases remain ongoing at this time, pending a final decision, of course, by Judge Brennan. Also making headlines today on CivicCenterTV.com's local news page from Nusrat Rahman at the Detroit Free Press. With the cold continuing to plunge Metro Detroit and much of the state of Michigan into single-digit wind chills, the city of Detroit opened 2 warming centers this week, as well as an additional 3 for overnight shelter. These warming centers are available through Sunday at 8 a.m. at the Farwell Recreation Center on Outer Drive in Detroit, as well as Patton Recreation Center on Woodmere Street. Direct from Nusrat Rahman's article, quote, people seeking shelter services or warming center placement should call the Coordinated Assessment Model, or CAM, the main entry point for people facing homelessness in the city to get shelter. They can call CAM at 313-305-0311. Again, that phone number is 313-305-0311. The hours of operation are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, and then Friday from 11 a.m. until 5 p.m. As well. Many of the Detroit Public Library branches are also open to those seeking a reprieve from the cold, including the main library branch on Woodward Avenue and several of the other branches. All of those details are included in this article from the Detroit Free Press on our website on CivicCenterTV.com on our local news page. Finally, making headlines today on CivicCenterTV.com's local news page from U Stella U at Bridge, Michigan. Earlier this week, the Michigan legislature approved in a party line vote 56 to 53 to move up Michigan's presidential primary election date to late February of next year. That, of course, was the vote in the House. Governor Whitmer is expected to sign the bill, which would make our state one of the first in the primaries to be voting in 2024, setting the political tone in a projected battle of political titans across the nation for the U.S. government's top position next year. Said Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks, a Democrat from Grand Rapids, as well as the bill's sponsor, Jeremy Moss, a Democrat from Southfield, quote, we value the voices of Michigan voters who are deserving of early participation in choosing each party's presidential nominee, end closed quote. State Republicans, however, did not appreciate the lack of discussion and the swift move by Democrats to put this bill to vote, with Representative Andrew Beeler, a Republican from Fort Gratiot, stating, quote, it's basically spitting in the face of half of the state, end closed quote. However, despite all of this, none of this is official just yet. Our primary date has not been moved up to February 27th from March 12th of next year at this time. The bill did not pass in the state Senate by a large enough margin in order to immediately become law. It passed in the House, passed in the Senate, surely is going to be signed by Governor Whitmer. However, there has to be a certain margin that it wins by, is affirmative by in the Senate in order to immediately become law. Unless that changes, it will not take effect until 90 days after this year's legislative session concludes. That means that the last date that the state could adjourn for the year, the legislature could adjourn for the year in order to make this date official for the 2024 election cycle would be November 29th. Surely, plenty more is to come on this developing story. We'll keep up to date on it as we get more information, as we learn more, and certainly you'll want to keep up to date on this story with your local news outlets, whether it be your local TV channels that are delivering newscasts throughout the day, us at the Megacast, or any of these different publications writing articles that we are then posting links to on our website, civiccentertv.com, on our local news page. All those headlines are there, along with helpful links to COVID-19 updates and other health and public information from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and the Oakland County Health Division. We have a great show ahead on this Thursday edition of the Megacast. Coming up next, we'll have our weekly mental health talk with Carrie Krawiec from the Birmingham Maple Clinic. Stay tuned. This is the Megacast.
When the temperatures are chilly, being together warms the soul. Keep the winter fun going. Help protect yourself and those around you by keeping your COVID-19 vaccines up to date. Can I ask you a question? Why do you want to get the COVID-19 vaccine?
I don't like getting sick. The virus will die. It will be easy to not catch it. Keep my family safe and keep playing soccer because I love being vaccinated.
What's your hope for everyone?
I hope everybody gets the vaccine to keep safe and strong. Be like happy, having fun everywhere. Everyone stay safe and hope you get the vaccine.
1 in 4 Michigan homes has high levels of radon, a naturally occurring radioactive gas known to cause lung cancer. It doesn't matter where you live or what type of home you have. You won't even know it's there unless you test. So don't wait. Testing is cheap and easy. And if there's a problem, it's simple to fix. Visit michigan.gov/radon to learn more.
We took action. Will you?
Welcome back to the Megacast, our live daily TV, radio, and streaming show talking about all things Michigan. I'm Tyler Kieft. Learn more on our website, civiccentertv.com/megacast, where you'll find more information on all of our partnering stations across the Great Lakes State, including our co-flagship, My Michigan TV, and find all of our full shows and each individual program on demand as well. All of that information is on our website, civiccentertv.com/megacast. Joining us now on the program is Carrie Krawiec, a therapist at the Birmingham Maple Clinic, for our weekly mental health talk. Carrie, thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you on as we are recognizing Groundhog Day this week. This morning, Punxsutawney Phil seeing his shadow, 6 more weeks of winter, but also plenty of more time to focus on our mental health. And as we recognize Groundhog Day, let's talk today about grounding ourselves with our mental health, especially when we're experiencing some of the recurring traumas that can often cause us a lot of stress and other problems day to day. So when we talk about grounding, define that for us and what it means to ground our mental health.
Sure. There's sort of 2 different forms of exercises or therapeutic interventions that involve grounding. One is a mindfulness practice. When we're feeling anxious, we are preoccupied with the future, and all of our thoughts and feelings are oriented in the future. When we're depressed, often our thoughts are preoccupied with the past, with guilt, with regret, with unpleasant feelings about things that have happened before. Also, you mentioned trauma. Trauma is another thing that can take us both directions, right? Recurring thoughts of things that have happened to us in the past and a lot of dread for the future. Grounding is a way to orient ourselves in the present, to orient our mind, our thoughts, our feelings, and to sort of clear the brain of these excess or irrational irrational thoughts, and really just clean it and trim it down to what's presently in front of us. Additionally, there's another form of grounding that is beneficial, but also a little more scientific, but it's really about aligning the cells in our body with the charges of the earth. As an industrialized nation, we probably don't get enough fresh air, skin to the ground, bare feet to the ground time. Science is showing there's some real physical health, but also mental health benefits to those practices.
And so when we are in these sort of situations where we're feeling some of those emotions that may be associated with anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder, or just memories coming back that maybe aren't the greatest memories, then something jogs that and brings it back to the surface. Where do you start in that grounding in grounding? Because these can come on at any time and from any situation, and it's not necessarily something that someone's going to immediately recognize as, I'm having some sort of an episode with a repressed memory and I need to ground myself. So what is that first step that people should take?
Sure. So I'm going to, like I said, there's two distinct forms of grounding. So I'm going to start with the first, which is the mindfulness practice of grounding. The technique that's the most famous and most widely used, most recommended by therapists is called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. So in this technique, you use your body's senses, sight, smell, taste, touch, and you go through them you can do any order that you want, but you'll find there's some easier than others. If you start with 5 things I see. That's usually the easiest one. So you can look around your surroundings, your physical space. What do you see? It may be, certain, I see this vase, or I see my table, I see this painting. So you go through 5 things you see. And then from that, you'll move to 4. What are 4 things you feel? I can feel the softness of my sweater. I can feel the back of my chair on my back. I feel my earbuds in my ears. So 5 things you see, 4 things you feel. Then you might go to 3 things I hear. So, I can hear someone running water in another room. I can hear the sound of your voice. I can hear the sound of my voice. Next might be smell. So what are 2 things I smell? I can smell my cup of coffee. I can smell an air freshener in this room. And last thing, taste, right? I can taste this coffee. I can taste the remainder of toothpaste from this morning. But that once you've gone systematically through all of your senses, you'll find you're further away from all of those anxious thoughts. So if you think of anxious or distressing thoughts as like taking us into a dream or a nightmare, kind of out of this world, grounding brings us back down.
And so just how is this effective in tempering some of these different anxieties or the recurring post-traumatic stress that someone may be experiencing commonly when they're using these grounding techniques? How does that work to kind of bring them back down from the height of that anxiety they may be experiencing to that grounded level, thus the name of it?
Well, there's a couple different interactions at place. One is that it's exceptionally hard for us to think and feel at the same time. So if we're feeling all stirred up, if we're feeling emotional and anxious, our thoughts are not that rational. So rational thought and all of that irrational feeling don't likely happen at the same time. When we start thinking, even really simple exercises, there's some ways to even approach this. Say, for example, children during a temper tantrum, is that if you ask them a question, what color is my shirt? What color is your cup? Things that are sort of easy to answer, it's kind of hard for them to continue to think and feel about whatever had worked them up. So it helps bring us back to a little bit more rational place in our mind, and also without doing it too strenuously, right? Because if it was too hard to answer a question, we would just become emotionally flooded again. So it is a way to just restore some easy, rational thinking. Also, it serves to clean it out, just like I used. It just takes those irrational thoughts and makes them not so important in our mind. It moves them to the back burner, and then we're thinking about things that are, like I said, very easy, calm, not too difficult for us to handle.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec on today's edition of the Megacast from the Birmingham Maple Clinic, our weekly mental health talk with Carrie on Thursday mornings on the program. You can see all those on our website, civiccentertv.com/megacast, and join us each Thursday morning for our talks with Carrie Krawiec from the Birmingham Maple Clinic. More information on their website, birminghammaple.com as well. And Carrie, timing is really important on this too, because especially with anxiety and even with post-traumatic stress and the anxiety that brings on in a completely in a different way, but also a similar way to generalized anxiety, the more time that goes by, it tends to be that sort of piles up and keeps intensifying. So getting into these grounding techniques quickly, I would imagine, makes them, if not more effective, then prevents from severe anxiety coming into play and leading to some other more detrimental outcomes. But sometimes that timing may not be right in the situation somebody's in their daily life. So what suggestions do you have then if someone's beginning to feel some of those anxieties coming on or the post-traumatic stress coming back and taking effect, to get into those grounding techniques, especially if they're in the middle of the work day, or they're in a meeting or some other situation where those techniques may not necessarily be something someone can immediately engage in?
Sure. Well, one of the most beneficial things about this grounding technique is that you don't need anything with you but yourself. So, and you can do it completely inside your own mind. You don't necessarily have to talk to somebody about it. So that those things make it, much easier to apply in any scenario. But you're absolutely right. Once a person has reached a panicked state, any kind of breathing, mindfulness technique, calming technique are much harder to apply. Imagine the value of working out daily versus like needing to run away from a lion if you were being chased, right? Is that the best case scenario is that the routine practice is something you do early and often, so that you feel comfortable to apply it in a time of need. So that being said, regular practices, regular breathing exercises during periods of calm, regularly using the grounding exercise, doing mindfulness, even meditation, something like 90 seconds of meditation a day is proven to improve mood and reduce anxiety. Having those practices daily will help make them that much more easy to access during a time of high stress, high anxiety, panic or other forms of emotional distress.
And you mentioned too the interaction with the outdoors or with nature can also be a very effective grounding tool also. What are your suggestions on that, and just how, and also go into some details on why that is so effective in helping to ground us also when we're in these sorts of moments of anxiety?
So this is new and very understudied science that's just gaining traction now. And there is some overlap, but what they're discovering is, obviously we know in our industrialized society, we have higher, depression and anxiety than we have ever had in history. And what they're connecting it to is that we are not as connected to our earth, physically touching the ground of the earth. And this isn't about grounding just this experience of touching it. It's really about the electrical charge, right? Like, so when you hear about grounding, like in terms of electricity, it's the same idea, right? That we can align the electricity in our bodies with the electricity of our earth, and that there's benefits to health, cardiovascular health, reduction in pain, length of life, and improvements in mood and anxiety. What I think is especially cool about this is there's a way to blend both forms of grounding. Now, I know right now we're in Michigan and we don't have access perhaps to our grass, or, it's not safe to necessarily lay barefoot, skin to the ground. But that doing exercises when we are able to immersion in water, touching grass with our bare hands or bare feet, laying down on the ground. These are things that would help our electrical charge align with the earth. But also you could approach those grounding exercises. Do you feel the texture of the grass on your hands or feet? Can you feel the temperature of the water? So can you see the color of the grass? Can you see the color of the water? There is a way when we're eventually able to here in Michigan to use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique simultaneously with physical touch of the earth. In the meantime, there are other implements. There are grounding mats, grounding blankets, grounding patches. So there are things you can buy to have a daily sort of electrical grounding experience. But of course, incorporating time outdoors is always going to be beneficial for mood for multiple reasons, both biological and emotional.
And Carrie, you mentioned this earlier, you touched on this briefly earlier, but I'd like to get a little more detail on it too, because you can ground when you're feeling these feelings of anxiety or recurring post-traumatic stress to help calm yourself down a little bit and get out of some of those more stressful, acute stressful situations. But you also mentioned that just 90 seconds of meditation a day can have significant benefits on your mood and on your stress levels overall. So is it better to put these grounding techniques into use when you're feeling those anxieties, or to do that in advance, maybe to potentially prevent some of those situations of anxiety or post-traumatic stress recurring from being as severe?
Absolutely, right? That I think both. I think the routine practice helps on multiple levels. One, it helps create neural pathways in the brain so that those anxious thoughts aren't even as frequent or as present. The road most traveled in our mind, or the road quickest traveled, is the road most traveled. So our neural pathways, if we have routinely thinking negatively, either about the past or the future, then anything we experience shoots down our neural highway in a negative way. So doing something routinely calming, even when you're not in stress, just provides another pathway, an alternate route, so that when something happens to us at any point in our life, we don't just shoot down the worst case scenario highway. We have other paths. It's like using Waze or something. We have other avenues that our brain can go down. So the more neural pathways that you create, the more opportunities to divert those negative thoughts you're going to have. Also, it becomes very familiar and accessible. Like I said, the difference between running on a treadmill every day and then being able to run when you need to for your safety, having that routine behavior makes the comfort so that oh, I know what to do right now. It just makes it that much more easy to grab the tool when you need it than if you are completely unfamiliar.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec, a therapist at the Birmingham Maple Clinic, on today's edition of the Megacast. You can find them on their website, birminghammaple.com, or call them 248-646-6659, 248-646-6659 for more information and for consultation. Carrie, beyond these grounding techniques that you mentioned, going out into nature and connecting with the earth, and of course the 5-4-3-2-1 technique that you mentioned earlier on, are there any other techniques that you would suggest for people that may be feeling these acute anxiety episodes or recurring post-traumatic stress that may be able to help them, especially in those moments where that anxiety is heightening?
Sure. I mean, I think just an abbreviated version of the 5-4-3-2-1 technique is called 5 blue things. It could be 5 red things, 5 green things. It could be anything you want. It's also especially useful for children. My son, after the pandemic leading into in-person school, was very anxious about going to school, and we would do 5 blue things on our drive in the morning. I see a blue trash can, I see a blue coat, I see a blue car, but that in that moment we spent our time not talking about how anxious we were about our school day, but just looking for certain colors in the world, helped to just get us in the right place to get through the door. Also, I mean, there's dozens and dozens of different breathing exercises, yogic breathing, different other relaxation breathing. There's YouTube videos that do some guided breathing and guided meditation. Having some of those breathing practices on hand are also helpful. One, they reduce the likelihood of panic. They improve blood flow and stress hormones throughout the body. But at the same time, then they also become more accessible when you need them. If you start to pant or hyperventilate or struggle, to have the reminder that you have some strength and skill at some breathing exercises makes it that much more easy to apply in those distressing moments, which we all have. 248-646-6659. You can also send Carrie and the team an email at info@birminghammaple.com for more information. Carrie, anything else on grounding or on relieving anxiety and acute post-traumatic stress that we haven't discussed yet today that would be important for our audience to consider? I think that this topic was just so fun to be able to talk about grounding on Groundhog Day. And so, right, and I love the way you led into it, right? That like Groundhog Day, we have that vision of Bill Murray and this recurring nightmare he's in, right? And it just that for people to make this connection, to think if you're ever in recurring thoughts, recurring obsessive thoughts, recurring distressing thoughts, grounding is there for you, and you'll be able to shift gears and get out and move on to the next space healthfully.
Yeah, it's something to get your mind off of those things that are triggering that anxiety just enough to relieve it, so that you can use your other coping mechanisms to then recover afterward. Carrie, thank you so much for your insight and for joining us again today.
Always, thank you for having me.
BirminghamMaple.com is their website. Call them 248-646-6659 and join Carrie and I for our weekly mental health talks every Thursday morning on the Megacast. Find us on demand, civiccentertv.com/Megacast. We'll take a break on the program. On the other side, Dan Brown joins us from the Huron River Watershed Council. Stay tuned. You're watching and listening to the Megacast.
When the temperatures are chilly, being together warms the soul. Keep the winter fun going. Help protect yourself and those around you by keeping your COVID-19 vaccines up to date. Can I ask you a question? Why do you want to get the COVID-19 vaccine?
I don't like getting sick. The virus will die. It will be easy to not catch it. Keep my family safe and keep playing soccer because I love being vaccinated.
What's your hope for everyone?
I hope everybody gets the vaccine to keep safe and strong. Be like happy, having fun everywhere. Everyone stay safe and hope you get the vaccine.
1 in 4 Michigan homes has high levels of radon, a naturally occurring radioactive gas known to cause lung cancer. It doesn't matter where you live or what type of home you have. You won't even know it's there unless you test. So don't wait. Testing is cheap and easy, and if there's a problem, it's simple to fix. Visit michigan.gov/radon to learn more.
We took action. Will you?
Hello, nose. My nose knows is when somebody uses the bathroom. Mom, Polly didn't flush. Ooh, I smell cookies.
I smell an A+. How could my nose be running when it stays on my face?
Our noses know if those sniffles are just a cold, allergies, or COVID-19. So swab it. Test it. It's good to know.
Joining us now on the Megacast is the watershed planner at the Huron River Watershed Council. Dan Brown joins us as we talk about contamination and other environmental issues in our local area. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Glad to have you on. So you're the watershed planner at the Huron River Watershed Council. Define that for us. What does a day in your life look like as you're working in our local waterways and helping to maintain the status of our environment?
Yeah, so we do a number of things at the Watershed Council. You know, we coordinate volunteers. You know, we are stewards of the river, so our mission is to protect the Huron River and the wildlife and people that are connected to it. So we have a number of programs that are associated with it. My role is talking a lot about PFAS, making sure that the state regulators are doing what they need to protect our river, protect our environment. I'm also involved in dam removal and other river restoration projects. But we have a lot of projects that sort of run the gamut on environmental protection, river restoration, stormwater management.
And we hear so much about PFAS and the ways that it impacts our local environment, certainly our waterways. But where does this come from? What sort of products, what sort of industries are we typically seeing that PFAS contamination come from?
Yeah, so the first thing to realize is that PFAS is a huge family of chemicals. It's, the thousands of chemicals. I think, the most recent number was in the tens of thousands of types of specific PFAS chemicals that are out there and used. In Michigan, I think it's around about 100, maybe 200 chemicals that are used more widely, but it's a huge number. And they come from lots of different things, and they're used in lots of different commercial industrial processes. Typically anything that is waterproofed or has a really smooth surface, or is used to put out fires or lubricate anything, is typically going to have PFAS in it. But you'll find it in anything from firefighting foam used at airports, to your Teflon pans, to the siding in your house, to dental floss. So you really can find it anywhere. It's in some types of food, it's in some types of plants. So you can encounter it really, really wherever you look, because they are so pervasive and they've been used for so long.
And they not only have effects on our local waterways and on our environment, they can also have a number of health effects on humans as well. Can you speak of that and just how potentially dangerous that exposure can be to individuals like you and I?
Yeah, so the thing about PFAS is that they're toxic in just extraordinarily tiny doses. Really, what most of us, I think, would think of just like trace doses of this stuff is harmful when you're exposed to them over a period of time. But the exposure is more akin to smoking. So it's prolonged, repeated exposure that's really the concern, or really high doses that most of us would never encounter all at once. But yeah, you can run into those anywhere. It builds up over time. The other thing about PFAS is they never break down, so it can accumulate in your system, can accumulate in tissue over a long period of time. And that can disrupt really every bodily function that you can think of, and it's associated with a number of negative health impacts. Lots of cancers have been associated with PFAS, reproductive function, high cholesterol. There's some evidence coming out that it reduces fertility. So again, because the family of PFAS is so large, the number of health impacts is also quite large, and they are extremely toxic even in very low doses.
We're joined by Dan Brown, watershed planner at the Huron River Watershed Council, on today's edition of the Megacast, talking about PFAS contamination and the various ways it affects our waterways and can affect people like you and I as well. And are these easy to detect, or does it take a certain method of testing or equipment in order to detect PFAS contamination?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it is, because they are toxic in such low doses, we also need to sample, at incredibly fine resolution. So the tests have to be very sensitive to detecting these things. And, so what you're really looking at is really specialized tests that are very sensitive. And a procedure around collecting the samples that often is also very sensitive and careful, because even if you use the wrong gloves, or you're wearing the wrong makeup, or you, in some cases, breathe on it wrong, you might contaminate the sample with PFAS from you and not the source that you're sampling. So it does require just a tremendous amount of care and specialized tests to sample PFAS effectively. The good news is that more and more labs are getting better at it. So it used to be that the cost of PFAS testing and sampling was through the roof, and it's come down to where it's more in line with sampling other types of contamination that we might see, because it is everywhere and there's a lot of interest in sampling it. But it does require specialized sensitive tests.
And so we know that these are harmful to our waterways. We know that they're harmful in trace doses, so to speak, to humans. So then how do communities protect from PFAS contamination in their local area?
Yeah, so Ann Arbor is a good example of sort of what you can face through PFAS and through exposure. So if you're in a municipal area, you can rely on and ask your local officials about what's being done, what your concerns are. But the primary concern for most municipalities is of course drinking water. It's what we're going to be exposed to, what we're going to be ingesting over periods of time and getting exposed to potentially that PFAS. The good news is that the state of Michigan has sampled all public and municipal water supplies, and it's pretty rare that a water supply that is controlled publicly is out of compliance. And if they are out of compliance, then they're made to get back into compliance. And Ann Arbor's a good example where PFAS was discovered, and they took steps to filter PFAS out of their water at their drinking water intake, essentially by using the world's best, biggest, most powerful Brita filters. So there are steps that communities can do to reduce PFAS in drinking water supplies. It is extraordinarily expensive to do that, and it's far more effective to have the treatment take place at the source of contamination, which in most cases in Michigan is going to be an industrial polluter or some other entity like that. If we're talking about resident or rural areas with a lot of private wells, it gets a little bit trickier because then there's more responsibility and more burden on the individual homeowners to make sure that their individual drinking water wells are safe. So that it's then the responsibility of the homeowner, unfortunately, to get a drinking water test and make sure that they're not ingesting PFAS through their water. And if you did detect PFAS, there are steps you can take to filter out PFAS or remediate your PFAS exposure in your home if you're on a private well.
As you mentioned, in more rural areas or in areas where someone or a group of people may be on private wells, that is going to put them a little bit more at a risk, simply because the onus is then on them to protect from this contamination within that specific water source. So then just how greatly or how differently does PFAS contamination affect these more vulnerable communities than it does in other general areas that may have those protections in place from the municipal government or from other sources?
Yeah, and another great question. And we've seen this story play out with other types of contamination, but we're also seeing it play out with PFAS. So this is nothing new, unfortunately, that vulnerable communities are more exposed to PFAS in many cases because of the legacy industrial pollution that is often present in those communities, or because in places like rural areas there are often landfills or other dumping sites that were used nearby, and they're also on private wells, and there's more onus on those residents to protect themselves, and they often have less financial capability to do their own testing and protect themselves. So some unfortunate examples of like this, parts of Kent County have been exposed. Many are on private wells. Areas around Oscoda, where we have some of the most impoverished parts of Michigan, were exposed to PFAS contamination from the Air Force Base nearby. So it is a theme that we see, and it does require us to think about how we can protect those vulnerable communities that we typically see in really rural areas or really urban areas where there is a lot of exposure and less capacity to deal with those consequences.
So then speak to the role of industry regulation and their own personal checks and whatnot to prevent PFAS contamination, as well as the role of the government in overseeing how these companies, these different industries affect PFAS contamination and ultimately holding them accountable for protecting communities.
Yeah, so we absolutely need ethical companies to reduce or eliminate their use of PFAS entirely. In the majority of cases, PFAS are not an essential part of the supply chain, and they could be eliminated. So we need ethical use and ethical standards internally from companies. I was happy to see that 3M announced that they are ending production of PFAS. They have been a major supplier, and they've continue to be a major obstruction to good PFAS protections across the state and across the country. So I take what they're saying with a grain of salt, but I am happy that they are at least moving to ban PFAS. I would like to see automakers eliminate PFAS from their supply chain, not only in their own use, but in the places that they're getting car parts from. A typical use is the chrome plating that you find on cars. So all the plastic bits that are shiny. There was probably PFAS used in the production of those. So a lot of these sort of frivolous things that we could get rid of and avoid the use of PFAS, that there are ways to do that. And the companies responsible for making all those pieces are going to be the best suited to figure out how we can reduce PFAS use. So we absolutely need full engagement from industry to reduce PFAS use. That being said, we know that in many cases, like in the case of Tri-Bar in the Huron River watershed, we cannot necessarily trust those companies to act in good faith for their neighbors. So we need really strong regulations from local, state, federal government. At the state level, what we're really focused on right now is what we call polluter pay laws. Michigan had what we call polluter pay laws in the past, and over 30 years, those protections have been eroded. And we need to essentially reinstate those laws so that we can make polluters clean up their mess and also deter bad acts of pollution in the future. And at the federal level, thinking longer term and a bigger picture, we really need to ban the use of PFAS in non-essential uses going forward. PFAS bioaccumulate, they last forever. The problem isn't going away. The longer that we continue to use these chemicals, they're just going to build up in the environment and poison us to a greater and greater degree until we eliminate their use. So long term, we have to think about ending our use and dependence on PFAS.
Well, Dan, we appreciate you joining us and telling us more about this issue and giving us some insight on steps we can take as communities and things we need to be keeping in consideration in terms of how our local governments and our state and federal government are addressing PFAS as well. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much.
hrwc.org is their website for more information, hrwc.org, if you want to learn more from the Huron River Watershed Council. And you can also call them for more information at 734-769-5123. We'll take a break on the Megacast. On the other side, addressing mental health in the classroom. Christina Harvey from Oakland Schools joins us for our Oakland Schools Education Insider on the other side of the break as we address what they're doing from the ISD level to help your local school district address mental health in its student body. That's coming up next on the Megacast.
Let's savor these moments. Made possible by the COVID-19 vaccine. Keep the dining out going by keeping yourself protected and your COVID-19 vaccines up to date.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
Welcome back to the Megacast, our live daily TV, radio, and streaming show, talking about all things Michigan. I'm Tyler Kieft. You can join us live Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. across our network and find more information on where you can watch us in your local area, civiccentertv.com/Megacast, where you'll also find all of our full shows and each individual interview segment on demand, civiccentertv.com/Megacast. Joining us now is Christina Harvey from Oakland Schools for our weekly Oakland Schools Education Insider as we look into things that our local ISD is doing to help our local school districts on a number of different issues. Today, the topic of conversation, mental health in our classrooms. Christina, thank you so much for joining us.
With us. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate having you on. First off, just give us a little bit of background information about your role with Oakland Schools and some of the things that you work on from day to day.
Yeah, so I work to support our districts in providing quality health education for our students. So that looks like consulting with our districts around what it is they're currently offering, how they might be able to make those classes more engaging and relevant, and then also maybe developing resources or training for them. I'm also our school health coordinator for the Michigan School Health Coordinators Association. So I represent our region as one of 24 sites across the state that have expertise in supporting our young people's well-being when it comes to school systems.
And there's a lot that goes on in the background at Oakland schools to be able to make all these different things happen, to be able to develop these programs, execute these programs, and look into how they are working over the course of time so that they can have the goal effect on the students, but also can be modified to have an even greater effect. So with that, some of the different efforts that are made include something that happened late last year in December. Oakland Schools hosting its K-12 Live Well, Lead Well Summit, focusing on overall well-being of students, staff, and communities. Can you give us an overview of what happened at this event and some of the professional development that was undergone by Oakland School staff?
Yeah, so this summit was actually planned by 5 of our educational service agencies in the area. So not just Oakland Schools, but also representing Wayne, Macomb, Genesee, and St. Clair counties. Our superintendents were involved, as well as the other school health coordinators. So job alikes to myself were a part of this. And our goal was to really start the day out with a call to action. What are youth experiencing when it comes to well-being? How can we respond to what it is that's going on with their mental health and their overall well-being? So what programs or practices are shown to work within our schools? And also what kinds of resources or partnerships are available locally to support them in doing that work right now. And then we wanted to give space for those that came to the summit to actually be able to plan. So how do I use this information to move forward my work?
And this was a collaboration not just within school districts overseen by Oakland Schools or in partnership with Oakland Schools, but others in the nearby area too. I understand from the notes, from my notes, that 5 different counties actually were participating in this summit.
Yeah, we did have 5 different counties. So on the day that everyone came in, we had around 450 people that were participating with us from all 5 of those counties. We had asked for teams of staff from those districts that lead health initiatives to come in for this session. So think of leaders like the superintendents, principals, mental health professionals, school nurses. We had a wide range of individuals from buildings that came. We also brought in leaders not only from our educational service agencies like Oakland Schools, but also the Michigan Department of Education and community partners like our community mental health or school-based health centers from all 5 of those counties as well.
And this is something that has become more of a focus in recent years for not just Oakland Schools, but other ISDs and individual school districts too, is focusing on student mental health. It had been previously because of just a lack of a focus on it, and maybe the stigma being greater behind mental health issues, especially for kids, that these things weren't focused on. But another key factor was just schools didn't have the resources available to them in their individual districts or through their ISDs or other avenues to be able to access some of these programs and some of this information to enact these programs. So recently, the legislature and the governor passed a historic budget that puts a lot more of an investment in our students and in our schools. How do you envision that this new budget and kind of that renewed focus in education and education funding may impact the ability for school districts and for ISDs like Oakland Schools to be able to focus and make an impact on students' mental health?
Yeah, I'm really hopeful that it presents an opportunity for our districts to build that solid foundation, to secure the staff that they need, the services and supports that the research shows us are needed for youth to be healthy and to support their well-being, especially when it comes to their mental health. This might look like hiring mental health professionals and school nurses at best practice caseloads for the number of students that we have within a building.
And so following the summit in December, the K-12 Live Well, Lead Well summit that included schools from 5 different counties and certainly had heavy involvement from Oakland Schools. What steps have been taken since then, or maybe even already are in motion, through Oakland Schools to kind of take what was learned on that day from all that collaboration and now put it into action?
Yeah, so the 5 agencies that worked on pulling this together, those school health coordinators have still been meeting in order to better understand, what are districts reaching out to each of us about? How are we individually supporting them? And also, if it's appropriate or helpful for us to do something regionally again, that we're ready to do so quickly. And then at Oakland Schools, what we're getting ready to do is actually launch our Whole Child Collaborative webpage. And we're really hopeful that this collaborative branding will make it easier for our districts to access and find our services that support youth well-being.
And how is Oakland Schools then providing support to these local school districts? Because you can make all these plans and it can provide all these different suggestions for individual school districts, but some of them need additional help from their ISD or just need the guidance to get these programs sort of rolling and tailor them then to their individual student bodies.
Absolutely. So we are fortunate that in the last year, we actually did an inventory of what is it that we at Oakland Schools offer. So right now, we know that we offer around 50 different evidence-based programs and practices that help schools build those quality systems. And with those programs and practices, we reach a variety of ages and grade levels, from pre-K all the way up through transition programs. We touch on a variety of health topics, so not just mental health, but also thinking about areas like nutrition, social emotional health as well. And then we also offer those across a scope. So what we often call tiers, which is really about the intensity of the support that we offer. So some of our services are lower intensity, meaning that we offer them to every student within our building. Think like a health education class or the lunchroom where you go to get lunch. Also, some are of higher intensity. So fewer students need more in-depth support in order to be successful. And so we have, supports that go across that range. One specific initiative that I can share some details with you about falls into that category of all of our students would receive it. It's called our Oakland County Here For You project. And that project is really about youth voice and leadership. We go and train teams of high school students to be able to create campaigns in their buildings that increase awareness around mental well-being, decrease stigma around depression, anxiety, and help-seeking behaviors, and then also work to connect their peers to trusted adults and local mental health supports.
We're joined on the program today by Christina Harvey with Oakland Schools, their health curriculum consultant, joining us on today's program to search for Oakland Schools or go through your local school district and their link to Oakland Schools to find more information on various programs and resources available through your local ISD at Oakland Schools as well. And as we're putting these programs into practice, just what sort of impact is either projected or has been found through studies of just how much working with students on their mental health and focusing on student mental health can actually be very beneficial, both in the hallways of the schools, but also in the classroom and ultimately at home for a variety of different students.
Yeah, so we have a lot of research to support that overall healthy students are better learners. We have data that's back a couple of decades from agencies like the CDC or Centers for Disease Control that really do show us that when our students are engaging in healthier behaviors and less risky behaviors, that their academics improve, they're also more likely to be connected to social support. So having positive relationships with their families, with others in their community, and within their schools.
And these aren't just things, Christina, we appreciate having you on today's edition of the Megacast, and of course, always having Oakland Schools join us on the program for our bi-weekly Oakland Schools Education Insider. Join us again very soon for that, and find all of those editions of the Megacast on our website, civiccentertv.com, on our Megacast page, civiccentertv.com/Megacast. That is going to do it for today's edition of the Megacast. Big thank you to everyone that joined us on today's program. Carrie Krawiec from the Birmingham Maple Clinic, Dan Brown from the Huron River Watershed Council, as well as Christina Harvey, the health curriculum consultant from Oakland Schools. You can always find us online, civiccentertv.com/Megacast. Or join us for our live shows Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. across our network. More information, of course, on our Megacast page for where you can find us in your local area. And, of course, you can always find us on demand there as well on our Megacast page. Big thank you as well to our crew here in our studios at Civic Center TV, our flagship, Jared Clark, as well as Calvin Brown joining us in the studio for our program today, making sure everything goes nice and smoothly. And this new little setup we got over here, some technical upgrades happened here at Civic Center TV yesterday. That's why we were not on for a Wednesday program this week, but already moving along and chugging along very nicely here at Civic Center TV. A lot of great programming coming up, including back to our 90 minutes of live news and talk each and every day, happening tomorrow morning when Dave Scott returns with the Splash Live, followed by us at 10 o'clock here on the Megacast. Again, you can always find us on demand anytime at home and on your phone on civiccentertv.com/Megacast. That does it for today's edition of the show. We'll be back soon.